All right, folks, why don't we go ahead and get started? And I think other folks may come in. But I don't want to keep people from happy hour. So it's that delicate balance of coming out of stuff late and making it to happy hour. So I'll try to keep on time here. Actually, I'm going to keep my clock here to make sure I do that. But yeah, thanks everybody for joining. My name's Mike Walker, and I'm the director of Open Innovation Labs at Red Hat. I've been at Red Hat for about 11 years, and actually my very first IT job was at the USDA, so experience there, and then I did consulting in public sector for about 4 or 5 years, working with federal government, Department of Defense, intelligence community, and then later state, local, and education out in the West Coast. And so my new venture is Open Innovation Labs. But what I wanted to talk about today was more generally the concept of innovation labs, which is now being picked up in governments, and it's being used to catalyze change, including DevOps change, which we were just talking about in the hallway. So we'll get to that. And so just to start things off, I think the question that everybody should be thinking about is, how do we deliver impactful, high-quality solutions to our citizens rapidly? And my point here is it should not be sufficient to just do one of these blue things here. Doing things fast is not enough. We need to make sure it has impact. We need to make sure the quality is high, and we need to make sure we're hitting the right audience, perhaps the citizens. And so it must be inclusive of all those factors, right? And why are people asking for this and expecting it? Well, we're seeing an incredible amount of change faster than ever before, both in IT industry, technology is just moving really fast, but also with our people. So, I mean, a couple of simple examples. Nowadays, if you park in a parking space, you may think, I want to be able to pay that parking space with my mobile phone. Nowadays, when you drive over a bridge, you may think, I want to pay the toll using EasyPass or a free pass rather than having to actually stop and spend money. Nowadays, I want more access to different data sets from across governmental organizations so that I can get a better picture of what's going on for making a particular personal decision. So, you know, you could say people are spoiled, they're looking for instant gratification, but honestly, this is a huge opportunity for government to bring people closer to government through technology, and that's really one of our main objectives. But there is a major, major challenge to that, which is government, more than anything else, I would say, is governed by laws, created by laws, and by regulations, and therefore we need to meet certain security rules that are very specific, certain compliance, scrutiny, and oversight. So that can make a real challenge for creating that kind of technology-based change. And so the reality looks a little bit more like this, and probably everybody can relate to this in one way or another. You might have heard, all right, I'm ready to start this new project. Okay, well, it's going to be a few weeks before you get your infrastructure. And all right, let's get started writing the code. Well, that's all included in a 400-page requirements document. So, okay, great, now I finally got my code out and it's launched, you know, to a set of users. Well, oh, that service that you built that was in the requirements, that's actually no longer even useful. And that's the worst. When you've spent all that time and effort only to find out, oh, you know, the time has come and gone for that. There's something else that's replaced it. It's no longer important. So that's what brings us to this excitement and kind of the beacon on the hill, which is DevOps, because its entire purpose is to break down walls, to be able to ship increments of software faster and change the way we communicate to rapidly bring impactful, high-quality solutions to our citizenry. And I would argue that DevOps is no longer in the days of startups and unicorns anymore. It is real, and it is being adapted by government. I'll show you some examples. And it's being adapted by commercial industry outside of kind of the startup community. And people, when they talk about DevOps, talk about infrastructure as code or continuous delivery and measuring things like cycle time and lead time and mean time to recovery. All really important, but I guess my word of advice is not to obsess on the tools and the technologies. And I really like this quote by Dr. David Bray, who's the CIO of the FCC, who I think really helps put things in perspective. So with DevOps, or really with any kind of technology change or digital transformation, whatever it may be, It is first and foremost about people and organizational cultures. And then it's about the way those people get stuff done together. That's fundamentally the most important thing. And just as an example, you look at a tool like a hammer. If it's sitting on the shelf, it has absolutely no usefulness. It requires someone to pick it up and start using it to hammer nails. That's when it becomes useful. If somebody picks it up and comes up with a new way of using hammers to do something that maybe the creator didn't even think of, well, that's interesting. When engaged communities of users use that instrument or tool to get things done differently, that is when it becomes transformational. So my suggestion here is that don't obsess over the tools, obsess over the way we get things done with tools. That's the most important part of DevOps and any kind of transformational change. But there's a challenge to this, and it's ingrained very, very deeply in our traditional organizational structures, and I would say in particular in government. And that is that organizational structures are typically top-down. They are organized as command and control, often commanded and controlled by laws that are set. And that is great for Taylorism and the Industrial Revolution, and it works up to a point when it finally doesn't work. It works really, really well for optimization problems and for finding incremental improvements to existing solutions. It's really, really bad for finding transformational change and really innovative transformational improvements to products and solutions. And that's because you're not engaging communities of users and allowing ideas to bubble up about how to do things differently. And so one thing that I like to point to is the CEO of Red Hat, and I work for Red Hat, disclaimer. So Jim Whitehurst published a book almost exactly 2 years ago called The Open Organization. And I think it's a key point of Red Hat's history where we opened up the covers and said, this is how not just Red Hat works, but how organizations that take principles of open source and community-based innovation, this is how those organizations work. And frankly, not all of them are even open source companies. But principles that allow ideas to bubble up from the bottom and change the way we work together. And he talks about things like letting the sparks fly, which is a debate tactic that allows people to duke it out. If you've ever looked on GitHub at a really active open source project, it's not all roses. It's debates and getting it into it and saying, no, I don't believe this is the right way to do it, and I'm going to reject your code. And that kind of letting the sparks fly in a constructive way allows great ideas to bubble to the top, what we call meritocracy. And that's a different way of getting things done. It's a way that encourages people to step up and come up with new ideas and to build communities to take on that new idea, to build consensus and bring change from the bottom up. And I would argue that that different way of working has built some really amazing solutions and products. And it's a very successful way to create change from the ground up. And so sort of my point here when we talk about DevOps is I believe that a lot of the same cultural aspects that make DevOps successful are also found in open source software communities. And it's not coincidental. So, the principle of releasing early and releasing often, or creating a community to adapt to change more quickly, or simply teaming together to share and solve a problem. And the belief that, hey, by partnering together in communities both inside my organization and outside, we can solve problems faster than if we're working on our own is super important. And I think you'll find, and I'll show you later, that we can apply some of these same principles to adopt DevOps and make great software that solves problems. So a few lessons from what we've learned when working together with companies that are trying to adapt DevOps, and we were talking about this a little bit earlier. The first one is, yes, you need a mandate for change, but I don't recommend trying to do a giant swath of organizational change to a 50,000, 100,000, 300,000 person enterprise. Start small. Find the right project. It should be somewhere in between. It's not a throwaway piece of work, and it's not the top most mission critical work you're ever going to do in the company. Something that has real value and importance and impetus and business value behind it. And then be willing to experiment and iterate. Every software project is a new venture that you've never done before. Things will go wrong, and you need to accept that it's an experiment. You are hypothesizing that something may be better, and you may be wrong. So be prepared to fail, but be prepared to fail fast. And the importance is to catch problems early so that you can use a feedback loop to improve upon those failures and ultimately achieve success more quickly. And the last one that I'll leave you with on this steps to success is marketing. And you might say, well, what is that doing here? But frankly, if you're starting small, it is extremely important and probably one of the most overlooked steps to spend time creating enthusiasm in waves throughout the organization, to celebrate the work that's been done in small chunks and then tell other people about it and get them excited about it and create kind of a viral enthusiasm for doing things differently. And honestly, you have to spend time on this. It's not something that's going to just happen on its own. And the most successful transformations require that kind of internal and sometimes even external marketing to be successful at scale. Okay, so that's just sort of laying the foundation for what I feel is going on in DevOps and how open source is related. Now I want to share some examples of this concept of the innovation lab, which is where I come from, and examples of it in the government. And I'd like to start with this picture of the School of Athens, which is, a place, though the picture is fictional, it's a place where all these philosophers would get together and they would debate and they would get face-to-face and really come up with new ideas and push the bounds of human reason and understanding about the human condition. And this quote from Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom from California, I think, captures it in a real interesting way. He understands that by creating a space that's purpose-built for innovation, a place for people to meet, is most importantly, and I'm sorry it's hard to read, it will spur a culture of innovation within state government that allows us to bring technology and use technology to bring the government closer to the people. And notice that he's not focusing on the fact that we have certain technology in the lab. It's not about that at all. It's about spurring a cultural change. That's why folks got together at the School of Athens, and that's a really important concept for labs. It's an incubator for change. But wait a second. How is this going to work in government? I like this quote which points out that it's pretty much directly at odds with how government works. A place where we can experiment and have freedom to fail. Well, we plan in years or in multi-year increments with a mission plan and a set of deliverables and statements and a budget, and that's that. That's the way the government likes to work. Well, I would argue that's exactly the reason why we need innovation labs in government, because it's so much different than how you normally get things done, and it provides an opportunity to work differently and find out what works. So there needs to be budget for labs. And in fact, there is budget for labs. So these are some examples that are now popping up in the field. The California Innovation Lab, I'm lucky enough to have a relationship with Scott Gregory, who runs this lab in Sacramento. There are others in Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Colorado. And they all, frankly, are different. They have different objectives, but I will share some of sort of the commonalities about how they work, at least from my perspective. But I like Scott's quotes where he talks about a focus on experimentation and development, and he likes to use open source technology. And again, I don't think that's a coincidence, that some of the same constructs and ways of working and building software from open source are also very, very productive for doing innovation and for doing things differently. So why do folks use innovation labs to get things done differently? Here are a few kind of broad use cases. I think the first one is probably pretty obvious. If I've got a new idea and I want to launch it quickly, and I want to kind of disrupt myself or a new market, whatever the case may be, I want to prove out a prototype, I go to a lab. And it's a place where you can co-create, work with folks that are labs employees and folks that are not, that might have an idea for a particular agency or business, and build it together and build it quickly, and basically measure a hypothesis to see if it will succeed or fail. But the second one I think is really relevant for government, which is creating the catalyst for change. So I like to think of a big government agency as this big oil tanker, or really this is a cargo ship, not an oil tanker, so bear with me. But the cargo ship is massive. It's got a lot of people on it. It's got a lot of cargo, and it's really hard to change direction. And you need something that's purpose-built to catalyze the change in direction. So a lab is the tugboat in this analogy here. And the objective is for people to pop out of the cargo ship and spend a little time in the tugboat and come up with a way to tug that cargo ship. Maybe just 1 degree this way or that way, but over the long haul, you can end up in a different water, in a different charted territory by doing that. And the third one that I've seen labs used for is what we call the road trip. So take, for example, if you're about to buy a Tesla, which is like $100,000, and very expensive car, very high tech, I'm not just going to buy it based on what Consumer Reports says. I want to not even just take it for a simple test drive. I want to take it on a road trip across the state. And I want to take it up the mountains, and I want to take it through rain and sleet and snow. I want to put my family in the back. I want to have a subject matter expert from the Tesla company sitting next to me, showing me what all the knobs do. So I have the full experience. And so that when I'm done with my road trip, I can decide to make that strategic investment decision on my Tesla or maybe fleet of Teslas. So in the same way, if I want to experience the state of art with all these different technologies and really see how it's supposed to work, I can go to a labs, get my hands on all of that, understand the art of the possible, and then come back to make my 5-year mission-critical technology decisions based on that smaller experience. So since we have 11 minutes left, I'm going to go quickly here, and in the interest of happy hour, but I want to use an analogy. Maybe it's relevant for happy hour. What does a restaurant and an innovation lab have in common? So what I have seen in labs, firstly, I would describe similar to a kitchen. If you walk into a kitchen of a great restaurant, it's clean, it's got all the tools, it's got all the technologies, it's ready for experimentation, it's open, and you can see what everybody's doing. So transparency is really important. The chefs, you'll notice that before a day's meal, the chefs and actually the front of house all get around together face to face. They talk about the daily specials. Maybe they even taste the daily specials, say what's good, what's not, and they commit to each other, look themselves in the eye, and they say, we're shipping this together, this is what we're doing today, and we're committing to success as a single team. They work in pipelines. The method is just like a pipeline. You've got different people doing different tasks, and you've got an expediter checking that to ensure quality before it goes out to the consumer to make sure that it's moving quickly but also high quality. And then the meal is really an experience. If you look at a great restaurant, they don't do a ton of advertising. The advertising is through word of mouth and viral marketing. So if you have a great meal, it's an experience for all the senses. It's about socializing with the people that you sat with that day, and you're more apt to tell people, hey, you should go here. And that creates that infectious enthusiasm that helps new ways of doing things spread, new ways of things like DevOps. So we've tried to take that. I want to share a little bit about my lab, which is Red Hat Open Innovation Labs, and kind of distilled that into what we say is doing DevOps in our kitchen. And the way that it works at Red Hat is to immerse a team, usually a small team, like a 2-pizza box team, 3 to 6 people, and it's cross-cutting. It might be developers, business owners, product owners, maybe infrastructure and operations and QA, something like that, paired up with subject matter experts on technologies, on Agile, on Scrum, and on software development methods. And we experiment. We say, here are some hypotheses around work that we could do and business value that it might provide. We will assume that it may or may not be true, and we're going to prove it at labs. That's the focus of our effort. So we walk out with a working software prototype that proves those hypotheses or disproves some of them. But we also walk out with recipes for working differently, recipes for catalyzing change that we can take back to the organization and say, hey, we came up with a new way of organizing that helps us get work done more quickly. And we also found out that this way doesn't work. And each one of those are equally valuable to bring back to the larger scale organization to create change. So I want to just skip that last slide, and let's spend the next 8 minutes. I want to actually switch to demo mode. Let's go check out a real lab. So I'm going to have a seat and show you a little bit about how our innovation labs work. So the first thing I want to show you, and let me make the screen a little bit smaller here so it fits, is a website that we created to help launch a labs environment quickly. So let's say we just decided, hey, we're going to build a new application. We're going to spin up an app that's a Node.js app. It exists today. I've actually got the code over here. I'm going to copy the URL right now. And I want to start building new features on it more rapidly. So I'm going to go in here and choose the technologies that I want in my labs environment. And this is great because we can choose everything that we want upon the start of our engagement. So I'm going to choose, I need a web server. I'm going to use Node.js. And I'm going to use a backing store, which is MongoDB. And you can see we can bring in other technologies to experiment and play around with. But we don't stop just with the app dev tools. We need a set of tools for doing DevOps. and getting our hands on it on a daily basis. So we typically recommend Jenkins for CI and CD. I could choose a source control management tool. I'll choose GitHub because my code is in GitHub right now. Bring in tools like Jira and Slack for doing agile project management and chat and even chat ops. Bring in, well, Sonatype is here, so I'll bring in Nexus today, which I highly support. And testing tools for learning how to do BDD or other kinds of testing, etc. Everything we do at Open Innovation Labs is containerized by default. So we use OpenShift, which is Docker and Kubernetes. We deploy it in a reference architecture format. And that's because we want to make sure everything we do is portable and can be run anywhere you can run a container, which is basically anywhere you run modern Linux environment. And then you have your choice of hosting infrastructure. So if we want to get experience running on public cloud like Amazon or Google, we can even mix and match and have a hybrid environment, perhaps private and public. All of those are options that we've got pre-programmed and ready to roll in lab. So I'm going to choose OpenStack because I know that's an environment that's available to me for my demo today. So let's go ahead and click Submit. I've got my environment. This is what I want to do my Node.js application development. And what you see here are all the different layers, sort of the contract for what I'm going to get in my lab on day one. But it's not just icons on the screen. This actually has been automated. So our secret sauce is Ansible Tower. That's what we use to automate the deployment of this entire environment. We can deploy it in 60 minutes or less in public cloud or private cloud. And as you can imagine, that is a game changer. If it's taking weeks or even months to get infrastructure set up in your own organization, if we can come to labs, a place that's purpose-built for speed and experimentation, get this thing up in 60 minutes, now we can get to the business of providing value, and we're not just wrestling with getting something up and running. And moreover, we get exposure to this automation so that we can learn how to do it in-house. So let's go ahead and build this environment. I'm going to give it the URL of that code repository that I brought up earlier. And I'm going to give it a project name of DevNation and hopefully not fat finger my password. And click Build. Before I click Build, though, I'll just show you, we don't have 60 minutes. All right, happy hour is 5 minutes away. So I have already set up an OpenStack and OpenShift environment, and we're going to deploy everything else we need. But just to show I'm not fooling anybody, that's a brand new blank environment there with nothing in it. So I'm going to go ahead and click Build. And what that does is it takes all the parameters that I've picked here and sends it to Ansible Tower. And I'll also share, this is a simplified kind of demo-ish example. So what I haven't been doing is like user management, groups, and sort of all the fancy stuff. That is built into the automation as well, but it's not necessary for a demo. So what we're seeing is kind of the simple version. But let's go ahead and open up Ansible and Ansible Tower. So as I mentioned, Ansible Tower is what we use to automate everything. And it's great because it's kind of the place where our developers and our operations team meet, and you come up with something you want to introduce to the lab, you manually deploy it once, and then you automate it by building an Ansible playbook, and finally you share that playbook with everybody else in Ansible Galaxy or somewhere else, and now everybody can do that. Everybody knows how to install and use that new tool. So it's extremely powerful for information sharing and automation, and just a place for a collaboration. So if I go into the Ansible jobs here, I can see that this build is running and all of those parameters like DevNation got passed in. So this is a real job run. And what's happening is it's executing a set of tasks. These tasks are idempotent, meaning it doesn't have any side effects. So I can safely run them over and over again on my environment and not be afraid of breaking it, basically, which is awesome. And then if we look over in OpenShift, you can now see it's beginning to populate a set of tools and an environment that are integrated, that knows how to build my application, knows how to build and maintain a CI/CD pipeline in Jenkins, and promote it from one stage to another and integrate it with other tools and technologies. So what I didn't show you is what the app was that we were building. So let's go ahead and go in here. It looks like a minute ago, this app called Infographic was built, and it's now doing a rolling deployment in progress. And in fact, I can even up the number of nodes if I want 5 nodes running, basically 5 instances for load balancing purposes. It's very easy for me to do that from the command console here and experiment with failure modes, for example. So let's look at that graphic. And in fact, it should look familiar. I deployed the infographic, so the same tool that we used at the beginning. But you can see here in the URL that the URL is DevNation/infographic. So this was automatically set up. We did DNS registration, set up the networking, set up the storage, built and deployed the application in a matter of, I think it took about 90 seconds to do that. Moreover, we can make changes to this. So let's say that I want to change the Red Hat icon because we're at DevNation. This is not just Red Hat here. And change some text. So let's put the developer's hat on and do that. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller so you can see. If I go into the website and edit, well, let's just edit the image for the sake of time here. And I'm going to upload a new file. So I went ahead and this morning pulled down a new version of the logo that I thought would look nice, this DevNation Federal Washington, D.C. Just copied it out of my own slide deck. I have not tested this, so this will be fun. But usually it works. And I'm going to go ahead and upload that. So I should now see my latest commit in my source control is that new picture, which is smaller, but OK. Let's see what it looks like. So great, I've got it on my laptop. Let's deploy it. So I mentioned there that one of the things that was set up is a CI/CD pipeline that knows how to build, test, and deploy my application in different stages. So I'm going to log into Jenkins. So this didn't exist until we deployed our environment. And you can see there's a pipeline called DevNation pipeline. So I'll click on Build. And this pipeline has everything it needs to go grab the new copy of that code. It's going to check it out. It's going to run it through a simple security scan. You can imagine a much more complex one, which we could build in labs with some cool tools for enforcing compliance. And then it's going to go ahead and build the image. So it knows how to build the application and wrap it into an image. It's going to check that image into a registry. So now we're talking about a Docker registry that's integrated with our container platform called OpenShift. And then it's going to deploy it to a development environment so that we can start to see, do I like my change? And if I like my change, I can then promote it from one environment to the next. So if we go into OpenShift, and I'm fast about it, and go back to development, I should now see that the build is running. And in fact, right here you can see that it's now going to do a rolling deployment. So it's, for every node that it shuts down of the old version, it's going to spin up a new one, which allows for a change to roll over as new requests come in. It won't interrupt service for any of my users if I had any in my dev environment. And now it's up and running. So let's see what we have. And it worked. So I have my new picture. And what I wanted to show you here is that when we're working in labs, the cycle time is really, really low. It's easy for me to come up with a new idea and change it and see it and share it and promote it. So if I want to then promote it to the test environment, to do integration testing, it's a click of a button. Because I've built an image, it's also really important. I only build this application once. Why is that important? Because I want repeatability. And if I build all of my configuration into an image, that image is immutable. And so when I deploy it to my test environment, when I deploy it to my UAT environment, et cetera, I ensure that I'm not changing anything except maybe a database password, which is in a config map or secret or something like that. And that reduces errors. So we talked about working fast but ensuring high quality. I'm not fat-fingering anything here. I'm one button clicking to the next stage. And that ensures repeatability so that my end users in the acceptance testing here will have the same experience that I had on my laptop or in development. So hopefully you can see that by creating an environment that's designed for speed and experimentation and automation, it allows us to experience DevOps, not just talk about it, and to come up with new ways of working together as a team to build software. And I'm 2 minutes over, so I was close. But I just want to wrap it up by saying, I like this quote from William Shatner, talking about the fact that if you're doing any kind of discovery, you might think you're going one way and then find a lead and go another way. And by the time you finish, the story is maybe a lot different than what you expected. But those are the best stories. So that's exactly the kind of attitude that we bring into labs, which can make it really fun, but also very, very productive. So I'll just leave you with Red Hat Open Innovation Labs is one of many labs, and I believe it's a great way of creating catalysts for change and really getting experience in doing things like DevOps. The way that we work together is usually beginning with something called a discovery session, which is when we map out what we want to do and how it will achieve business value. That's a free session. That's my 30-second advertisement. And other than that, that's Open Innovation Lab. So I hope that was valuable. Thank you very much for your time. And for those of you that didn't get a sticker or a book or anything, I've got some up here. So please help yourself, or there's also some in the corner seat over there. And enjoy happy hour.
The discovery session is one day.